This is John Daly. The program you're about to hear concerns an inquiry into a matter touching the question of life and death. You are invited to serve.
The American Broadcasting Company and United Nations Radio present The Great Dilemma, a special program concerning the problem of disarmament, its compulsions and its complexities, its past, its present, and its future. The Great Dilemma, featuring Francis L. Sullivan as the first witness. Here again is Mr. John Daly.
Now for the inquiry. First, the terms of reference. Put it this way. The problem of disarmament has been on various international agendas for several decades. Statesmen, political thinkers, and delegates plenipotentiary have put forward hundreds of plans, proposals, and resolutions. Thousands of speeches have been made, and many millions of words have been spoken. On the slate of time, nations have been, for years now, working hard at the complex arithmetic of war and peace in an effort to reach that final, that elusive equation where armed security is balanced by disarmed peace, where life can be protected by something better than the fear of death. But the equation, the solution, still eludes us. And today, two new and powerful multiplication factors loom behind the unresolved arithmetic of war and peace. Fission and fusion, A-bombs and H-bombs. Have these made the solution easier or more difficult? Where do we stand today? There, then, you have your terms of reference. Open up the inquiry, then.
Let us begin by throwing a backward glance at those now silent years of unrewarded effort and ask, what kind of message do they have for us? Summon to mind the first witness. Your name, please?
I am known by many names. Cynic, skeptic, scoffer. But I speak in the name of history. Call me a realist.
Well, we'd rather not prejudge the issue. The inquiry has just begun. Let your name go unrecorded for the moment. Your testimony.
I fear, sir, that you'll not like what I have to say.
Our mind is open. The floor is yours. Tell us the worst. Perhaps that, in the end, will be the best.
What I have to say, Mr. Chairman, can be said in a few sad words. Philosophically, sir, the vision of a world disarmed and at peace, a world which would beat its swords into plowshares, is an ancient one. It is still no more than a vision. It has been preached by all the great religions of the world. They are still preaching it. It has been sought by men of noble mind in all countries and in all ages. They are still seeking it. Politically also, Mr. Chairman, the idea of disarmament has a long history. The efforts of men to lay down weapons of war began way back in the bow and arrow days. Forgive me for introducing a little bit of erudition, but I think you may find the information of interest.
Yes, by all means, please go on.
Way back in 1139, an interdict was issued by a source of high authority, the Second Lateran Church Council. It said,
certain weapons, to wit the crossbow and arch, are deadly and odious to God. Their use is henceforth interdicted and forbidden.
Exactly. Ever since then, Mr. Chairman, men have been trying to lay down ever-improving versions of the crossbow and the arch. They have had peace conferences, disarmament conferences, and declarations of pious purpose. But what is the net result? Today we have a stockpile of arms larger and surely more deadly and more odious to God than ever before. Our ability to destroy ourselves today is matched only by our ability to deceive ourselves into thinking that disarmament is possible.
You live up to your warning, sir, and I find you don't conceal your realism under any bushels. But perhaps you'll explain to us why you've reached the conclusion that disarmament is not possible.
The reason for this unpleasant conclusion, Mr. Chairman, lies in the nature of arms and in their value to states. Arms, sir, are instruments of war. As such, they are useful, indeed indispensable, for states in times of war. This much is obvious. But what is not quite so obvious, and what we generally fail to recognize, is that arms have an equally great, if not greater, usefulness for states in times of peace. The fact is that nations build arms not only to put them into the hands of their soldiers, but even more so into the hands of their diplomats.
That's an interesting, though also a somewhat disturbing thought, sir.
Let's face the facts, Mr. Chairman. The art of successful diplomacy depends not only upon the soundness and persuasiveness of your arguments, but also upon the hardness and persuasiveness of your military hardware. This being so, how can any nation really be expected to disarm?
I see, but aren't you ignoring the fact that there have, after all, been some successful disarmament agreements in the past?
And not since 600 B.C., Mr. Chairman. It is true that in that year, 2,500 years ago, the Chinese states of the Yangtze Valley formed a disarmament league which lasted for about 100 years. But there has been nothing since then which you could call a general disarmament agreement in any sense.
Nothing nearer our own times?
Near our own times, sir, there were only the naval treaties signed in Washington and in London during the second and third decades of this century. These merely fixed ratios for the 5 major naval powers of the day: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, and Japan. Also, in 1925, there was the Geneva Protocol, which prohibited the use, though not the manufacture, of gas and bacterial weapons. So you see that these were limited and restricted agreements which scarcely deserve the name of disarmament.
Yes, but limited though they were, sir, they were, after all, disarmament agreements. What would you say was the reason for these limited successes?
I suppose, Mr. Chairman, the reason was just plain, calculated self-interest. In certain circumstances and under certain conditions, I suppose, nations have more to gain than to lose by entering into certain agreements. And so they do.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Your testimony has been lucid and helpful.
Oh, you're quite welcome, I'm sure.
We proceed with the inquiry now and see if self-interest today works for or against disarmament. Will the next witness take the stand, please?
Mr. Chairman, I should like to speak, if I may, of money. Mad money. Mad thermonuclear money.
Well, go right ahead, sir.
Sir, I needn't take much of your time. My story, like that of the last witness, can be briefly told. But if I may say so, it also makes more sense. Briefly, then, the position is that the world so far has been spending sums of money on armaments which have run into billions, but which have still been, in a way, within the compass of arithmetical calculation and comprehension. But today, a new algebra is at work, an algebra of destruction. A for atomic, and H for hell. This new algebra has taken the world beyond the frontiers of arithmetical comprehension into a region where war speaks the Greek of megatons, and where economics follows at its peril. From the economic point of view, the money spent on armaments has always represented a thieving from the treasury of life for the purposes of death. But today, in order to feed the ravenous appetites of the nuclear and thermonuclear war apparatus, nations must not only steal from the treasury of life, they must ransack it wholesale. Theft is no longer enough. Only a mass robbery can support these weapons of mass destruction.
You use strong words, sir.
You mean words like stealing, theft, and robbery? Fortunately, I have authority for using them. The highest authority. Listen, sir, to President Eisenhower.
Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed.
And with this thought, Mr. Chairman, with this thought, and just one other, I seek your permission to surrender the witness stand. The purpose of all these vast and wasteful armament expenditures is to provide security. Security against the fear of death in war. But, sir, there is no nation and no economic system on earth which can long continue the self-defeating process of guarding against death by cheating life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Economics has spoken. Now, who else wishes to take the witness stand?
Aye, sir. I should like the hearing.
Well, this way to the stand, sir.
Thank you.
And in whose name do you speak?
Largely common sense, I think, Mr. Chairman. But if that isn't imposing enough, put me down as speaking in the name of politics. I wish to challenge statements made here by your first witness in the name of realism and of history. I think I can show that we have reached a point where arms have achieved such destructive perfection that, ironically, they have destroyed their own value, both military and political.
You may proceed, sir.
From the point of view of the political significance of war, sir, you may say that the world has passed through 5 broad historical stages. In the beginning, killing was an individual act of precision. You got your enemy one man at a time. Then came the stage of small-scale group killing, when new inventions made it possible to bring down more than one man with one blow. At the turn of this century, other inventions followed, and we passed from what you might call the cottage industry process of manufacturing death to truly mass production methods. These were tried out during World Wars I and II. In 1945, however, the fourth, you might say the penultimate stage of warfare arrived with the atomic bomb. This was a huge step forward in the industrialization of death, and it called for deep, new thinking on the subject of war and its place in the political calculations of nations. But we didn't get the chance to think long. On the 1st of November, 1952, with the explosion of the first hydrogen bomb, the world entered an entirely new era. It passed from A to H, alphabetically only a third of the way through to the end, but in terms of war, right at the end for all practical purposes. Permit me, Mr. Chairman, to cite certain calculations made by an eminent engineer diplomat concerning the military significance of the H-bomb. Witness, Monsieur Jules Moch, French representative on the UN's Disarmament Commission.
A single thermonuclear bomb would be enough to destroy the city of Paris completely, to ravage the much more widespread city of New York, and devastate the whole of Greater London. If 6,000 atomic bombs adequately dispersed would have to be dropped in France in order that the entire population should feel the effect more or less seriously, the same result could be achieved with only 15 thermonuclear bombs.
Mr. Chairman, most of us still live in the atomic age, both when we think of the destructiveness and the political significance of war and the threat of war. But the atomic age, sir, was yesterday, and that, in this case, was a very long time ago. Whether we know it or not, we have made the great transition. Recall, if you will, Mr. Chairman, the way that Sir Winston Churchill put it in one of his last speeches as Prime Minister. Quote,
"There is an immense gulf between the atomic and the hydrogen bombs. The atomic bomb, with all its terror, did not carry us outside the scope of human control or manageable events in thought or action, in peace or war. But with the hydrogen bomb, the entire foundation of human affairs has been revolutionized, and mankind placed in a situation both measureless and laden with doom."
Unquote. And, sir, the matter doesn't end here. Having achieved the ultimate by way of weapons, nations are now working on the ultimate by way of delivering them to the target. This adds new symbols to the algebra of catastrophe. To the A and H of weapons, you may soon add the ICBM of delivery, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. We are informed, sir, that this is potentially the most effective delivery system that can be imagined. We are told that it will travel at many times the speed of sound and reach from one continent to another in a matter of minutes, almost instantaneously. We are about to enter the age of push-button annihilation.
But surely, sir, you're presenting only one side, the gruesome side of the picture. Surely the science which produces these weapons will also know how to provide a defense against them. After all, throughout history, each new weapon has led to a parallel defense.
Permit me, Mr. Chairman, just 3 brief quotations in reply. They are from the highest authorities. First, Monsieur Jules Mock.
For the first time in the history of humanity, we are confronted by the spectacle of a thrust to which there is no parry, of defense methods helpless in the face of attack.
And now some words of Sir Winston Churchill.
There is no absolute defense against the hydrogen bomb.
And finally, the words and voice of President Eisenhower.
Let no one think that the expenditure of vast sums for weapons and systems of defense can guarantee absolute safety for the cities and citizens of any nation.
And that is the military situation in this thermonuclear age. And it has a most fundamental bearing on the subject of disarmament. It means, no less, that whatever political purposes wars may have served in the past, today their political value is over. Why? Listen to some recent words of Sir Anthony Eden.
Wars in the past have often begun because one power, or combination of powers, has believed its forces sufficient to win and hold some overwhelming advantage. Sometimes their ambition has brought them victory. It can never do so in this nuclear age, when oblivion confronts aggressor and victim alike.
This prospect, Mr. Chairman, the prospect of mutual annihilation, constitutes the new fact of international life today. And you can put this fact down, sir, as the most powerful item of international self-interest working in favor of disarmament.
But hold on now, sir, not so fast. How do you draw that conclusion? It may well be that atomic wars have become too totally destructive, and therefore it may well be that they cannot any longer figure in the thinking of nations as a means of pursuing political aims. But does this necessarily mean that there is today a greater incentive for disarmament? May it not be that the logic really flows the other way? There are many, you know, who argue that modern weapons, the weapons you've been talking about, are so absolutely destructive that they themselves are the best guarantee of peace. How about that view?
I know, sir, that there are many who think this way. There are many who feel that by producing the H-bomb, the world has achieved a sort of paradoxical solution to the disarmament problem. I recognize the thinking. I know it is not uncommon. But the point I wish to stress is, and this is important, that such reasoning forms no part of the officially announced thinking of governments. Whatever their views on the deterrent value of H-bombs, no government regards the existence of the bombs as a sufficient guarantee of peace. On the contrary, there are too many risks involved, too many possibilities of the deterrent not working. Sir Winston Churchill mentions 2 such possibilities, lunacy and despair.
The deterrent does not cover the case of lunatics or of dictators in the mood of Hitler when he found himself in his final dugout.
And Monsieur Mock raises another possibility, miscalculation.
Who can certify that criminal governments will never make up their minds to forestall aggression by aggression and commit mass murder in order not to become the victims of mass murder?
Permit me, Mr. Chairman, to conclude my reply to the peace through the H-bomb theory with just 2 more quotations. Number 1, in the words of Canada's Secretary of State for External Affairs, Mr. Lester B. Pearson.
Peace rests uneasily on 1, even less easily on 2 hydrogen bombs.
And 2, the words of Premier Nikolai Bulganin of the Soviet Union.
It is wrong to assert that inasmuch as East and West possess the hydrogen bomb, the possibility of a thermonuclear war is automatically excluded.
Is your question now answered, sir? May the peace through the H-bomb theory be laid at rest?
Your answer, sir, is noted, and I thank you. I think we may well close this second phase of our inquiry also and move on to the last. there remain for us only these questions to ask. What effort have we made to reach a disarmament agreement? Where do we stand today? So, summon now the last witness, a report from the United Nations.
The story of the disarmament effort in the United Nations, Mr. Chairman, is long, continuous, and intricate. I doubt if I would have the time, or you the patience, sir, to go through it all in any detail.
Well, as for patience, I believe I have some reserves that I may call upon. I'd just like to say that it would help our understanding if you were to concentrate less on the individual trees and more on the wood as a whole.
Well, that makes my task very much easier. Well, then, for many years, sir, in fact, till the summer of 1955, the discussion seemed to be going around in two concentric circles, as it were. One circle formed by the question of controls and the other by timing.
Could you make that clearer, sir?
Well, Mr. Chairman, you might think of it as a type of chicken or egg proposition. Within one circle, the Western powers insisted that control must precede disarmament, and the Soviet Union argued that disarmament must precede control. In the second circle, the Soviet Union insisted that a prohibition of atomic weapons should be the first disarmament step, while the Western powers said it should be the last.
And was there any movement from these opposite positions?
In May 1955, Mr. Chairman, the Soviet Union formally accepted a compromise solution which had been proposed the previous year by France and the United Kingdom. The essence of this was that the three elements of disarmament, reduction of conventional weapons, prohibition of atomic weapons, and control for both, be combined in one comprehensive program proceeding by stages.
So the riddle, or at least a part of the riddle, seemed to have been answered.
But at this stage, Mr. Chairman, let me cite a paragraph from the Soviet memorandum of last summer when the compromise was accepted. The Soviet Union said,
"There are possibilities beyond the reach of international control for evasion and for organizing the clandestine manufacture of atomic and hydrogen weapons, even if there is a formal agreement on international control."
This paragraph, sir, became crucial in later developments. Last December, the United States representative, Mr. Henry Cabot Lodge, Jr., accepting the point made by the Soviet Union, elaborated it in these words.
The production of nuclear material has been underway for a decade, under no international control whatsoever. During all of this time, it has been possible to hide atomic weapons.
This position, as I have said, Mr. Chairman, was commonly acknowledged. But the United States and the Soviet Union drew different conclusions from it.
What were these conclusions, sir?
The Soviet Union asked that, while detection devices are perfected, the agreed stages of disarmament should begin at once, under a control system outlined by it last May and incorporated later in the Bulganin Plan. This envisaged, as one of the measures of control, the stationing of international observers at key communication centers to guard against the possibility of a surprise massing of forces for attack. The United States, on the other hand, said the situation called for a new, fundamental, and extensive restudy of the whole question of international inspection and control. In the meantime, said the United States, all previous disarmament plans should be placed in reserve, and attention centered for the moment on the Eisenhower Plan. This would have the United States and the Soviet Union exchange military blueprints and throw open their territories to their aircraft, which, as peace sentinels, so to speak, would carry out mutual reconnaissance as a means of preventing a surprise attack. In the General Assembly last December, Mr. Lodge painted this picture of the purpose and value of the Eisenhower Plan.
This will make major surprise attack impossible because of the impossibility of concealing preparations for it. This will remove the menace of World War III.
The chief representative of the Soviet Union, Mr. V. Kuznetsov, for his part, accepted the sincerity of the Eisenhower Plan, but questioned its value, unless it was linked with a disarmament program.
If there is no previous agreement on the actual reduction of armaments and the prohibition of atomic weapons, the other party may well make use of this intelligence in order to increase its armed forces and stockpiles of armaments, including atomic weapons.
And that brings your story pretty much up to date, does it not?
Well, not quite, Mr. Chairman, though very nearly so. My account brings the situation up to the conclusion of the last session of the UN General Assembly. The Assembly, last December, urged the 5 nations principally involved, and that means the 4 major nations and Canada, to renew disarmament efforts, giving priority to both the Eisenhower and Bulganin plans. The 5 nations are meeting in London for this very purpose, and there are hopes of further developments there. You recall, Mr. Chairman, the recent letter from President Eisenhower to Premier Bulganin suggesting the possibility, under the protective umbrella of the combined Eisenhower-Bulganin plans, of working out safeguards under which the future production of nuclear weapons could be halted and fissionable materials diverted to an international agency for peaceful purposes. Disarmament efforts at this stage, the President said, should concentrate on bringing the nuclear threat under control and on limiting major armaments rather than limiting military manpower. What has happened since then, and is happening, you don't need me to tell you. It is there, in the newspapers, on your doorstep.
Yes, that is so, sir, and I thank you for your account. Before you leave the stand, just one more question. This problem of disarmament has been on the international agenda for many decades. On the slate of time, we've put down 1 million words, and we've been working hard at 100 fervent equations. Why can't we break the deadlock? What central difficulty is it that defies solution? What is it that mocks the combined wisdom of the world's nations?
Pick up a piece of paper, sir, and write down this primary equation. Fear leads to armaments.
Mm-hmm.
And against this, write, armaments add to fear.
Yes, I've got that.
And now, sir, write down this other equation, equally primary. Disarmament needs trust. And against this one, note, disarmament enriches trust.
Yes, I understand that.
There, then, is your problem. Somewhere there, lurking within those interacting equations of fear and faith, somewhere within those interacting equations of faith and fear, Mr. Chairman, must also lie the answer.
Our inquiry has ended. Our inquiry into the problem of disarmament. Thank you for serving. The answer? That belongs to governments, to you, and to tomorrow. Till tomorrow, then, this is John Daly handing the gavel back to the United Nations.
You've been listening to The Great Dilemma with John Daly as host and featuring Francis L. Sullivan, Charles Corvin, Louis Van Rooten, and Charles Dryden. The program was produced and transcribed by the American Broadcasting Company and the international staff of United Nations Radio, as the first of a series reviewing major issues before the world today.
Humanity's Children. A true story taken from the files of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, dramatized by Stanley Wright, and narrated and produced in Geneva by Wilfred Thomas in cooperation with UNESCO. Humanity's Children.
I'm Wilfred Thomas. I've got a story here I want you to help me finish. I'm a steam radio man. I move around the world quite a bit in my job, recording the music and the stories of the people and trying to capture on reels of coated tape the sounds of our time. And that's how I came across this story. Somewhere along the line, somewhere in Europe, I was tipped off about a balalaika orchestra that was worth hearing. So I tracked it down. You know what a balalaika is, don't you? Sort of guitar, I suppose you'd say, a Russian instrument. And when a bunch of the boys get whooping it up, they sound like this. That's it. That's the recording I made in the refugee camp where I found the band. Sitting in the barrack canteen, and pretty cold and chill as it was, too. The fellas in the band looked shabby and scruffy. They were refugees, men from the four corners of Europe, brought together by the accidents of war. I said to the leader, a long bearded type named of Joseph, "Yes, you play well, all right, but the sound's a bit thin, wants filling out. Haven't you got any more players?" And he said, "Well, there were 9 of us, but now, as you see, there are only 5. What happened to the others? Well, that's what the story's all about. So we'd better begin on the cold spring day 5 years ago, when they played together for the first time, a day on which summer and winter blended, gaiety and sadness. For on that day, a group of refugees had left the camp forever. After long negotiation, they'd been accepted for resettlement in America, Canada, Australia, and the buses had carried them off to the port, to the ships, to a new life.
Mr. and Mrs. Luce and 2 children. Borotsky, bachelor. Mrs. Coron and little daughter. Right, that's the lot. Okay, move on.
Let's know what it's like over there.
Bye. Bye. See you soon.
Oh, well, that's that. Good luck to 'em. Coming, Paul.
Where are you going?
To Cosima. She's just said goodbye to her children, you know. They're off to America.
Do you think she'll ever see them again?
Oh, how should she? The doctors wouldn't pass her. She'll never get a visa.
How's she taking it?
Her eyes are dry, but, well, I can't bear to look in them. That's being brave, I suppose. But what else can she do? There's not a corner where she can be left alone.
How can we help her? Well, let's play some music, Joseph. Let's sing and dance and make her smile again.
That's the stuff. Fetch a balalaika. Let's round up everyone with a balalaika. Tonight we'll have a concert, and Cosima shall be guest of honor.
It may not be much, but it might help.
Well, that's how the orchestra began. After that, they played often, to fill the empty hours, to create in the dreary barracks which was their home a sort of a dream time, when they were all as young as their documents said they were. A time of forgetting the passing of the hopeless years, you know. Once in a while they'd play in a tavern and earn a little bit of money, but their great idea was to get away to a job and a home of their own. The first to lose patience, the first of the little band to break away, was Ludovnik. One day, Joseph was sitting on his bunk, staring into space and remembering a time of peace, remembering the village he feared he would never see again, when Ludovnik, with his wife Maria, came to see him.
I'm sorry, Joseph. I can't go on.
Oh, what's happened now?
We've just come from the clinic. They discovered that patch on my lung. It's been there ever since I had pneumonia when I was 12. But no visa for me. I asked this doctor fellow, does that mean I've got to rot in this camp? What does the patch matter? I'm a radio operator. Of course, I know he can't help it. Rules are rules.
I'm sorry, Ludovnik. This is a blow.
But it's all humbug, what these doctors say. I know that when we get to a country and they see what we're like, they won't send us away. The thing is to get there. That's what I told Ludovnik.
All right, but how would you get there?
We've thought it all out. I'll get a job on a ship, and perhaps they'll take Maria, too. She can cook and darn and wash for the crew. We'll take our little daughter, and we'll find a country for ourselves.
How are you going to get to the port? We've none of us enough money to buy a train ticket, even.
We'll walk.
Very early next morning, Ludovnik and Maria, with their little daughter, Tanya, each carrying the cardboard suitcase that held all they possessed, left the camp. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived for Joseph, a most unusual event.
Who in the wide, cold world could be writing to me? Oh, of course, it's Maria. Let's see. Dear friend Joseph, here is wonderful news. We're leaving tomorrow. Ludovnik has found a job as a radio operator on a cargo ship, and I'll be the cook for the crew. We don't know where we're going, but we're on our way.
Well, Ludovnik, you still have time to leave the ship.
Captain, we're determined to try our luck. You haven't changed your mind, have you?
Changed my mind? Why should I? The owners of this ship don't care about anything that happens to me or any of the crew, as long as I keep this rusty old tea kettle afloat. I won't change my mind. But do you realize these papers of your husband's are no good?
They are good papers, Captain. They're official. I got them from the camp commandant.
Of course, they're good papers now. But what happens in 12 months' time? Look yourself. It says valid for 1 year only. Who's going to renew them? I can't.
We'll have found a country to settle in long before the year's up.
I hope you're right. Well, it's no business of mine. You're welcome on the ship as long as you're a good cook. We cast off tomorrow morning, early tide.
Well, Maria?
Well,
Afraid?
a little.
We've no choice. We've been lucky so far, haven't we? Here we are on this ship with the world before us, instead of in the camp where all we could do was sit and wait. We'll find a place, Maria. Our luck'll hold. It must hold.
And did they find a place? Well, their ship called at many a fine port, but no official would let them land. They might have been criminals. They might have had the plague.
Sorry, your papers are not in order. You have no visa.
I know. I only want to land to see the authorities. You see, I've my wife and daughter...
You are stateless. I can't even issue a landing permit.
But I only want to...
I'm sorry. Rules are rules. Next, please.
Time passed. The months added up to a year. 2 years. 3 years. Little Tanya fell ill in a British port. She was taken ashore, and her mother and her father watched them carry her away, not knowing whether they would ever see her again, for once more they were refused permission to land.
Sorry, these papers are no longer valid. We can't let you in.
From port to port of the free world, the nightmare voyage went on. Crews were changed, cargoes were discharged, and new cargoes loaded, but the radio operator and his wife never left the ship.
Are you writing to Tanya?
Not tonight. Tonight I'm trying to put into words our lost hope.
Hope? Is there such a thing left?
In the newspapers from the last port. Did you see them?
What does it matter to us what goes on in the world?
In the papers there was a bit about people like us, people with no country. There's a man to look after us, a High Commissioner for Refugees. So I'm writing this letter to him.
A letter?
Well, what harm can it do?
Read it, Ludovnik.
I say, all we want is a small place for shelter and work enough to keep us alive. But our home is a ship, and we must always come to port without ever setting foot on shore. We have no land where we have a home, and no land will let us in even for a short time. Something should be done, but how and who should do it, I don't know. Please help.
Is that all?
Well, if I say more, will it have more meaning?
No, you write our story very well. You really mean to send it?
I'll ask the captain to mail it at the next port.
In an office in Geneva, Ludovnik's letter was read. Arrangements were made with the Home Office in London, and 6 months later, Maria and Ludovnik were given a visa, a simple piece of paper, which allowed them to join their daughter in England. There, they've started life afresh. But Ludovnik's story started something else. Today, a great number of countries are ready to accept an agreement to help the many hundreds of refugee seamen who, like Ludovnik, may be prisoners on board their ships. That's how Joseph lost the best player in his balalaika band. Now there were 8. The second to go was Dmitri. Time after time, Dmitri had been before migration missions. Time after time, he'd passed medicals and interrogations, but always the examiner would come to one little entry in his file, would look at Dmitri with a cold stare, and would reach for the rejection stamp. For once upon a time, Dmitri was mixed up in a cafe brawl. Nothing serious, a few tables overturned, a few black eyes, but the police stepped in, and Dmitri didn't get away in time. He spent a week in jail. So, he had a criminal record. One morning, word went round the refugee camp that Dmitri was missing. Somehow he'd slipped across the frontier, hoping to find a job in another country. But he'd forgotten one thing, that a man, to have any rights, must have papers. This is what happened to him.
Hey, you, wake up, wake up.
What? What's the matter?
What's the meaning of this? You're not allowed to sleep on a bench in this park.
I'm sorry.
How did you get here?
I visited a friend late last night. We had a glass, and on my way I sat on this bench, and I must have fallen asleep.
Is that so? Show me your papers.
Oh, wait a moment. I must have left them at home.
Oh, you did you? All right, what's your address?
Oh, now listen, officer. I haven't done anything wrong, have I? Sleeping on a bench isn't a crime. Now, can't you just let me go on? I'm just looking for work.
Looking for work? Maybe we have some work for you at the police station. Come on, we'll see what you can tell our chief officer.
For having penetrated on the territory of the kingdom without legally recognized travel documents, and without a visa, and being without known address, and being found guilty of vagrancy, 30 days imprisonment. After which time the named stateless Dmitri Roznov shall be expelled from the territory of the realm, not to return thereon on penalty of further imprisonment, not to exceed 90 days.
Well, this is as far as we go. You see that path?
Yeah.
Follow it for 300 yards. That's the frontier. Then you turn to the left and keep to the woods. Nobody will see you. Keep going from there on and it'll be all right. Now, good luck to you. And don't come back.
But Dmitri had no luck. He was seen and given 30 days for illegal crossing of the border, and then pushed back. And this happened again and again.
Dmitri, you've been before me 7 times. What are we going to do with you?
I don't know, Your Honor.
Well, what does the probation officer have to suggest?
I have written to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
And what's he got to say?
I have a letter from him here. His representative in this country is taking it up with the Ministry of the Interior, and we hope that everything will be all right soon. He also got in touch with the Ministry of Labour, and I received this note from the local Labour Office.
Let me read it, please. In the meantime, is allowed to take up employment either in the textile or mining industry. Please have him call at this office between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. No, that seems all right. Well, Dmitri, I think that this time we'll give you a chance. Pending the regulation of your position, we charge you to present yourself to the police every week until your residence permit is issued. Next case, please.
And so Dmitri found a job and a new country. But just as important was the result of his appeal to the High Commissioner. Dmitri was not the only man in need of papers, work permits, travel documents. Today, a convention exists which guarantees every refugee his basic rights as a human being. But let's come back to our story. Of the balalaika band, Dmitri gone, well, Joseph had lost his second player. Now, there were 7. The fate of Paul and Nicholas, 2 more of the band, was linked through Sonia, the daughter of Nicholas.
Paul, may I come in?
I want to talk to you.
What is it, Sonia?
Why are you angry with me? I must know. Whenever you're with my father and I come in, you find an excuse to leave. People have come to notice it. What have I done, Paul? At one time you were different.
I'm not angry with you.
Then why do you avoid me?
Do you really want me to tell you?
I'd much rather you were frank with me.
Well, if you must know, what can a man like me offer you? I have no job, no home, no future.
Why must you think of all these things? Can't we just be ourselves? One day we shall be ordinary people again.
How do you know? I had a promise a year ago that I could go to Australia. In the meantime, I have seen a Brazilian mission, a Canadian mission, and I am still waiting.
We are both healthy. You have a trade and I can do secretarial work. I've even learned how to make hats and dresses. I could go to America any time I wanted.
But you're still here.
And you know why. Father needs me. Oh, why think of all this? I love you.
But we must.
Don't think, darling, don't think.
They couldn't marry, but in a refugee camp, you can't keep secrets. One night, the Balalaika band went to play at a local tavern, and Sonia's father drank rather more than he could stand.
Listen, everybody. My family have always been respectable people. We had a farm and 5 servants, and every Sunday we went to church. We even had a priest to dinner. There was nothing ever to be said against us. But now, I am ashamed.
Please, Father, go home.
I am not going home. We are respectable people. Your mother would have died of shame if she had known what our daughter had become.
Father!
Isn't it true about you and Paul?
It's nobody's business, Father, what happens between Paul and me.
You are telling me that?
Yes, Father.
Nicholas!
How could you when you know I can't marry Paul because of you?
Because of me? Why? What have I got to do with it, eh? Did you ask me about you and Paul?
It isn't that. I don't want to chain Paul to this camp, but I can never go away with him as long as you live.
You can't go away with him as long as I live. No. Don't say anything. I understand. You're a good girl, Sonia. A good girl.
Oh, Father, I'll never leave you. I promise you, Father. Never, never.
Sometime later, Paul received his visa to go to America. Nicholas went to see Paul.
I hear you have your visa to America.
Yes.
When are you going?
I don't know. The consul will write.
And what about Sonia?
She won't come.
You must marry her and take her with you.
I can't force her, can I? You think I'd like to leave her behind?
Then you must marry her and stay.
No. I'll marry her, she will come, but I won't stay.
Is that your last word, Paul?
Yes.
That's what I wanted to know.
That night, when all was quiet, Nicholas sat at the side of his bed and prayed God to forgive his sins and to bless his daughter and his beautiful native land. That's what he said in the letter they found the following morning on the table in his room after they discovered his body hanging from a rafter. Now there are 5, for Paul and Sonia married and were accepted for migration. I wish I could tell you that Gregory and Stashek and the others, one by one, were saved from the waiting years. But real life is seldom as obliging as art. Truth weaves a crazy pattern. This is a story that has no end, as yet. Once there were 9 men, now there are 5. 5 aging men, waiting in a camp of concrete and wood. 5 of the many.
Yes, we're still waiting. Now and again we earn a little money by playing at a tavern, but our music, well, as you say, it's grown thinner, like ourselves. Thinner and sadder, too. We receive old clothes, toys for the children, from good people we don't know, and we're grateful. But we seem to live for no purpose. Each day takes one more grain off our dignity. We live on charity. We don't want to live on charity. We want a possibility to build a future for ourselves. And when we think of that, we're afraid.
They are afraid, the refugees, afraid they are forgotten, that they'll have to stay in the camps for the rest of their lives. And yet, today, there is hope. A 4-year program has been started by the churches, the benevolent societies, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. A program to give them jobs and homes, to put an end to the camps, to burn down the barrack huts with their history of misery engrimed upon the walls. But the refugees have been disappointed and bypassed too often to believe that their turn has come at last. And can you blame them? The United Nations program is not much more at present than a plan and a promise. Money has been brought together, but not enough money. Projects have been started, but not enough projects. That is why my story has no ending yet. I told it because on this day the world has to be reminded of a pledge it has made, and only partly fulfilled. It's inscribed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 14.
Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, housing, and medical care.
And yet, there are still 300,000 refugees in need, men, women, and children from many lands, victims of man's brutality. We may try to forget them, but they are there, our silent accusers, with their hurt and puzzled eyes. They are huddled together in crowded barracks and camps all over Europe, their strength and their talents being wasted. Why should they still be there? Well, very simply because when we, that's the United Nations in our name, resettled over 1 million refugees in new countries, we thought we'd done the job. It happens so often, doesn't it? We get sort of tired of a problem long before it's finally and fully solved. All the same, because of this, they are there, 300,000 of them, and they are our concern because of our promise. Because I suppose we're decent human beings. Mind you, I'm not saying that nothing's being done. Somewhere in Europe, at this very moment, something like this is happening.
You told me over in the barracks you were in the church.
Oh, Mrs. Smith, I'd forgotten you were coming. You see, I'm putting this Christmas crib together.
Oh, I do like these models of the Holy Family. You carve them beautifully.
Well, in the old days in our country, I used to do a lot of carving. Every Christmas we used to make cribs in the church and in our houses. and the women baked little cakes for the children on Christmas Day. In our country, Christmas is a real Christmas, you know, with plenty of snow, very crisp snow, and it's wonderful to be inside with all the decorations and gifts and good food around the fire and all the children, everybody merry and telling stories. Oh, well, it's quite different from what we know now.
Still, you make your church very beautiful.
I believe it's the only place where we still feel at home.
Do you know why I came to see you today? You told me some time ago that if you only had a small workshop where you could do your woodwork, and you had a machine and all the materials, you were sure you'd be able to fend for yourself.
Oh, one dreams sometimes, but I've given up dreaming. Once upon a time I thought of going to a new country, but nothing has come of that.
Well, what would you say if my agency were to give you a small loan?
So that I could start working and carving again? You might have to wait some time before I could repay.
That wouldn't worry me. My agency feels that you would be a very good investment indeed. We're quite sure that if we gave you this loan, you would pay it back. You see, with the money that you pay back, we can help other refugees.
You really mean that you'll give me a loan? This is going to be a fine Christmas after all. You know, I'm very bad at saying thank you.
You don't have to say thank you. Look at the crib. You see, Joseph and Mary, they too were refugees.
Well, there it is. A true story with an ending still to be told. A story of humanity's children.
Humanity's Children was written by Stanley Wright and narrated and produced by Wilfred Thomas with an international cast in the studios of Radio Genève. The balalaika music was recorded in the San Saba refugee camp in Trieste. The program was presented by UNESCO in cooperation with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
This is Frederick March. I'm going to tell you about The Long Walk. This is a true story of what's happened, what is happening, and perhaps what's going to happen in and to Korea. We have a big stake in it. The Long Walk. 3 words from a folk song that has been a tradition in Korea for centuries. The song is called Arirang. You're listening to it as I am speaking. It is the saga of 2 lovers who walked the long road to the hills of Arirang for their farewell meeting. Today, the song is symbolic of the Korean struggle against fate, their fight for freedom, for a united and independent homeland. This, then, is the up-to-date story of Korea's Long Walk.
1 year ago, at 10 a.m., July 27th, an armistice agreement was signed by the Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Command with the Supreme Commander of the Korean People's Army and the Commander of the Chinese People's Volunteers. Hostilities ceased at 2200 hours of July 27th, 1953. To mark this occasion, United Nations Radio presents The Long Walk, a broadcast commemorating the armistice agreement in Korea signed 1 year ago. With music recorded for this program in Korea and voices authentic and unrehearsed, we bring to you now The Long Walk, starring Mr. Frederick March.
The Long Walk. And to guide us through one of the most dramatic stories of our time, we'll get an assist from a real Korean, a young man by the name of Johnny Kim. Johnny Kim has an actual job with the United Nations, and at this moment he's in Korea. So he'll be represented here by Peter Kim, no relation.
Well, Mr. March, Kim is a very common name in Korea. It's like Smith, or Jones, or Brown. Now, this presented some problem to UNCRA because they found so many Koreans they hired for the UN had practically the same name.
Not so fast now, Johnny. UNCRA?
Yes, that's a part of the United Nations. The letters UNKRA, UNCRA, stand for the United Nations Korean Reconstruction Agency. It was set up back in 1950 by the UN to coordinate the work of putting Korea back on its feet economically.
Uh-huh. And your work, Johnny?
I'm a translator and interpreter for the UNCRA. I like job a lot, and it gives me a chance to improve my English, you know. But my father, he doesn't like it.
No, why not?
Well, he's not too happy about bringing a lot of machines and new ideas into Korea. He's afraid it might hurt our own family life. He's very conservative and likes the old ideas.
I see.
My brother doesn't like my working for the United Nations either. He runs a trading company and he makes a lot of money. He likes the new ideas. My father won't even speak to him.
No.
Me, well, I guess I'm in the middle. My father says I have silly notions. My brother says I'm too innocent. And I will change when I have seen more of life. But I have seen lots of life. The trouble with my brother is his women read the mail order catalogs.
His what? Read the mail order catalog?
That's right.
His women read the mail order catalog?
Yes. And they call it the dream book. And sometimes they dream just too much.
Of course, I see. And it's this sort of thing your father doesn't like, huh?
But he's wrong. Unless we make and run our own machines, we are licked before we start.
Yeah, but it's going to be tough doing that, isn't it, Johnny?
Oh, yes. It's going to be very hard. And a few of us who can see the future have a very difficult job ahead of us.
All right now, Johnny. Let's now take a look at how far the UN's helped bring Korea back to her feet during this year after the armistice. I'll call the shots, and we'll hear actual recordings of what's happening out there.
Glad to, Mr. March. Where would you like to begin?
Well, I don't know. I think the best place to begin is the capital, Seoul, right in the middle of the railroad yard. This recording was made back in the peaceful days of 1950. New locomotives are coupling with the cars. The cracked night train to Busan is being made up for its regular fast run. Freight cars loaded with goods are being shunted across the tracks by switch engines. Rail service to the provinces of Korea expanding every day. Does that explain things to you? What you hear now is also an authentic recording made in the Seoul Railroad yards sometime later. There's no explanation necessary. At 2200 hours, that's 9 a.m. at UN headquarters in New York, 1 year ago, the smoke cleared away, leaving twisted railroad yards and smashed rolling stock. Only the main tracks running north and south were still usable, but all the east-west lines connecting hundreds of villages in the hills and valleys were out of commission. The workaday life of Korea had slowed down to the pace of ox carts dragging along muddy roads. So the United Nations faced the task of making the wheels start to go round again. Mr. Ralph Jepson, technical consultant of UNCRA, makes this eyewitness comment.
The railways in South Korea are so important that all commerce comes to a complete standstill if the trains don't run.
Mm-hmm. What was your first move to get the railways into operations again?
The very first thing we did was to estimate the damage to tracks, rolling stock, and water facilities, the three basic essentials to the operation of a steam railway. Bridges were down, railway workshops were masses of twisted iron and shattered walls.
A pretty hopeless situation, I should imagine.
That's right. That was when UNCRA took on the responsibility for bringing in materials to meet the most immediate requirements.
And what about shops to repair the engines?
Would you like to take a walk around and see the kind of machine tools UNCRA is supplying?
Look, what's that machine that's making that weird noise over there?
That's a wheel turning lathe. UNCRA has one of those on order for the other main engine shop.
This must be one of the busiest and noisiest railroads in the world.
For its size, it is. But all this activity comes to a sudden dead stop at Pocheon, the most northerly railhead in South Korea. A few yards beyond Pocheon, the lines are torn up and the track demolished. And then there is silence. And beyond the silence are the communist outposts. The railroad, like the friendship between North and South Korea, is broken at this point.
I couldn't help but think, hearing Mr. Jepson, that this situation is like watching at the bedside of a very sick friend. You worry about every detail. Supposing the oxygen gives out in the night, will the medicine hold out? But then the doctor comes in and your hope goes up. Dr. UNCRA.
You know, Mr. March, I remember that lullaby very well. Jajangga, the song of the bluebird. They sang it when I was a boy, and even the Korean children today love to hear it. It helps them forget that they have no roofs over their heads, no walls to keep out the wind, and no homes of their own. Home means a lot to us, you know. We have an old saying that sort of fits here. 내 집 초가 삼간이 남의 키와 집보다는 낫다. My home with a thatched roof is better than my neighbor's home made of brick. Sleep, sleep, my baby, on thy loving mother's breast, as the slumbering birds and butterflies. Sleep, sleep, my baby.
Take the city of Seoul, for example. Fought over twice, the downtown shopping district completely destroyed. 80% of the buildings gutted. Outside the city, the fine apartment and housing developments the Koreans were so proud of. A mountain of crumbled ruins. And this city is typical of many. People scrounging for food and shelter, living how they can, where they can. As many as 6 families in one tiny shack. Others live in cardboard packing cases. Mother, father, and babies just existing in caves.
Sleep, sleep, my baby, riding on the wings of dreams, dreams of playing moth in the garden. Sleep, sleep, my baby.
How do you go about making houses out of havoc? Making bricks without straw? Matter of fact, it can be done. Sir Arthur Rucker, who used to be UNCRA's Deputy Agent General, calls it very interesting, but speaks in quite a matter-of-fact way.
There's a very interesting project for the building of new houses just outside Seoul. There we've brought in some machines from South Africa with which you can make compressed earth blocks. You put a little cement with it, make these blocks very quickly, and they're building very charming Korean-type houses with them.
I'd like to know a little more. Let's go to where they're building the houses and ask Mr. Olaf Huick, a native of Copenhagen. Mr. Huick is in Korea as one of UNCRA's housing project officers. What do these houses look like, sir?
There's a kitchen and an entrance hall, the latter being very small. Then there's a small living room and 2 undul rooms, which are actually bedrooms with a heated floor. The typical Korean floor construction, which features radiant heating, an old tradition which is very much older than the radiant heating we know from our part of the world.
All built by local labor with local materials.
You can take the soil right from the site you're building. You don't even have to cart it very far.
Mr. Huick has a point there, of course. Although they don't have to carry the earth very far to build a house, a lot of people carried a lot of ideas from pretty far to help Korea. Yes, the long walk has already begun. The Koreans are on the way. Now, what about the simple matter of clothes? Johnny, what do Koreans wear?
For visitors, I put on my good white silk vest and white trousers.
Mm-hmm.
But on most days, I wear a cotton white shirt and pants. The cloth is a little rough, but it lasts a long time.
It lasts a long time, eh? But why white cloth, Johnny? Doesn't it get dirty very quickly?
Well, Koreans have always worn white. You might call it our traditional color.
I see. Now remember, a year ago, Korea's textile mills had been practically bombed out of existence. So UNCRA earmarked the sum of $2,600,000 to help the textile industry to get back into production again. I want Sir Arthur Rucker of UNCRA, from whom we heard before on housing, to give us his impressions of this story.
There's a big textile factory where they spin cotton, raw cotton, into yarn and then weave it into cloth, which has been provided with a large amount of machinery from the United Kingdom. It was delightful to talk to Mr. Edgar from Lancashire, who would come out to help install this machinery in Korea. His delightful Lancashire accent in Korea was very charming.
Sir Arthur wasn't the only one to notice the Lancashire accent. The Koreans who installed the machinery had an ear for it, too. As a result, there were many natives in the towns of Anyang, Taijan, Gwangju, who today speak Korean with a Lancashire accent.
여보세요. 그게 좀 저쪽으로 좀 붙일 수 없습니까? 좀 빨리 하세요. Mr. Edgar, what I do, this machine, subsequently.
Really? Johnny Kim, I see you want to say something here. What is it?
Well, speaking as a 24-year-old Korean man, naturally, I'm a little interested in Korean girls.
Wait a minute, Johnny. What brought up that thought?
Well, Mr. March, you were just talking about a textile mill.
So? I don't get it. Tell me more, Johnny.
Well, I mean clothes.
Oh.
Look, I think you'd get a good idea if you follow the UN's microphone to a place I used to go to sometimes, where the boys and girls go dancing.
I see.
It's in a bombed-out building on the ground floor. Not very fancy, but the young people like to go for a few hours.
Mm-hmm. But what does dancing have to do with clothes, Johnny?
Well, I think a friend of mine, Miss Ong-yeol Kim, can tell you what I mean.
Good.
Well, we Korean girls like to copy the style clothes we see in the mail-order catalogs. You know, it is hard to get good clothes in Korea. They are making some now, but it's mostly for working. I hope that someday soon they will be able to make some pretty materials. We are like all girls everywhere, I guess. We like the stories in the movies, and we like to dress up and make believe we are as glamorous as the girls we see on the screen. Do you think it is wrong to make believe when you have nothing, no future?
There may be many Koreans who feel they have nothing, no future. But many things are not what they seem. For actually there is wealth hidden in Korea. Natural resources, valuable ores and minerals. Now, what's the first step when you've got minerals in land and you want to determine their worth? Well, they have to be assayed. So UNCRA built a mineral assay laboratory in Taijan, open to anyone who wants to bring in a strange-looking bit of metal or rock for a test. It was a great day when the laboratory was open in Taijian. Johnny Kim was on hand to translate. The speaker, General Coulter, Agent General of UNCRA.
Mr. President, distinguished guests, friends, the opening of the Taejon Mineral Assay Laboratory, constructed by the United Nations Korean Reconstruction Agency, marks a significant milestone in the development of the natural resources of Korea.
국제연합 한국 재간단에 의하여 건설된 대전 광물 분석 시험소의 개막은 한국의 지하자원 개발상 중대한 표석이 되었습니다.
These buildings, modest though they are, mark the beginning of a new era in the exploitation of the mineral wealth that lies in the beautiful hills and valleys of Korea.
우리는 오늘 국제연합과 한국 간의 협조의 상징으로서 이 시험소가 대전에 서게 됨을
Mr. March, may I say something here as a Korean?
Please, Johnny, please, by all means.
You were talking about natural resources, and I feel that probably the greatest natural resources Korea has are its children.
There's no question about that, Johnny.
It is for our children that we are taking the long work, trying new ideas to help our own land.
All right. Let's listen to some of the story of Korea's kids today. We are in the playground of the middle school in Seoul. A cluster of little girls in midi blouses are playing the Korean brand of skip rope, which they skip very high and very fast with both feet. Over in the corner of the yard, little boys are practicing running starts. Running is quite a national sport. The Koreans have never forgotten that they won the marathon in the 1936 Olympics and the Boston Marathon of 1948. Some of the children are playing jacks with pebbles. Others are squealing away at hide and seek. Behind them stands the school. One quick look and you'd say, this isn't a school, this is a bombed-out building. And you would be right. But it would be a school, nevertheless. No chairs, no desks, one broken blackboard, and 4 walls, each rent with a huge hole through which one can see the sky. 20 rows of Korean children sit cross-legged on the floor and learn to read and write and remember. I know that nobody believes that schools can be made to spring up overnight like mushrooms. But on the other hand, I'd like Johnny Kim to read a paragraph to us from the most recent UNCRA monthly report. And then we'll really see what a job the UN has tackled. Will you do that, Johnny? Section 9, page 22, paragraph marked Construction of Classrooms, $1,790,000 allocated.
More than half of the school-age population now lacks the proper accommodation or has none at all. 100 of schools throughout the country are held in the open air or in shelters. This project is planned to procure building materials sufficient for the construction of 1,300 permanent classrooms.
1,300 permanent classrooms.
In addition, 1,500,000 board feet of lumber from
감나무가 한 그루 있다. 이 감나무는 내가 낳기도 전부터 있었다 한다.
All this for the children. What you call Korea's greatest natural resource, Johnny.
Yes, Mr. March. Anything we can do for them wouldn't be enough.
After all, children don't think of war in terms of ideals or attack or defense. They only know that the big noise has passed, and that they're hungry and cold, and that there's no one to protect them. They try to protect each other, too. It's not uncommon to see 8-year-old children carrying on their backs baby brother or sister.
Hey.
Little beggars, badgering, stealing from GIs, even from government officials. Dozens of ragged, hungry kids. You see them everywhere.
No more 10 cents.
You crazy? $10.
Yeah, $10.
$10.
I didn't ask you to shine them shoes. You get a dime and like it.
Brown powder. No, black.
That's brown.
How about the sides? What the sides called?
Much of what you have heard now was started only a year ago, the 27th of July, 1953. But let's remember, though, for whom the United Nations is helping to reconstruct Korea. For this lady, a widow.
I lost my husband during the war. That was 1950, September 1950. Actually, I do not know. My husband was killed or kidnapped. So I'm listening radio carefully and reading the paper very carefully. But I guess only makes me tired. But still, I wish I can see my husband. That's all my hope right now.
The UN is working for this little Korean shoeshine boy.
He bobs the boogie-oogie ring, the tiny noogie shoeshine boy. He tries to worry, cause the shoeshine one shoe. He dies together, more even the feed him fine. Everybody kiss the little engine shine. He's a great big bandozo. He bobs the boogie-oogie ring, the tiny noogie shoeshine.
And for this elderly citizen of Seoul.
I'm so happy to coming back to Seoul and see the citizens all not hurt very much. I don't know how to mention myself, how I'm feeling right now, but my tears coming out before I have anything to mention.
And who for the UN is on the job? A builder from the north, Copenhagen, Denmark.
This machine, which is imported from South Africa, produces building blocks out of earth mixed with cement, a very good ratio of cement, 1 to 15 of earth.
On the job is an expert from the south, USA.
Transportation in Incheon was impossible. So a few months ago, some streetcars from Atlanta, Georgia were unloaded. And would you believe it? You can still see the names of the Atlanta streets through the new coat of paint on the streetcars. Spring Street, Peachtree, Ponce de Leon.
A teacher from the east.
You can see school children, young children, trekking out in the morning to the school about 3 or 4 miles away and coming back to their homes in the afternoon, and sometimes they don't even have a lunch for that day.
A skipper from the west.
Millions of dollars worth of goods and machines and supplies were brought to Korea from all parts of the Western world. At one time, recently, there were 17 ships on the high seas converging on Korea.
Can I add some friends of mine to the list of those working with the United Nations?
By all means, Johnny, please.
Well, Mr. March, on the job, day in, day out, are men from United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, and many more countries, to say nothing of these GIs.
Well, I'm a lonely soldier sitting here in Korea. I'm a lonely soldier sitting here in Korea. With rotation coming, what have I got to fear? Well, I'm a lonely soldier.
And now, a man who all his life has worked for a free Korea, Dr. Syngman Rhee.
My country is so poor. It is devastated by war. But in the real values, we Koreans are rich. We have hope. We have an unconquered spirit. We love freedom enough to be willing to die for it, and we have faith.
Mr. March, for me, that music, like the voice you just heard, is part of Korea. Arirang, our song of the long walk. There are many versions of our national folk song. Some sad, some about love, and some about the troubles of Korea, of bad times and good times. This song has become a sort of symbol among Korean patriots. It reminds us of a better past, of our old, proud days.
I'm glad you've listened with me to this sound picture of the first steps of Korea's long walk. In this first year of rebuilding, the United Nations has begun to fulfill its pledge to the people of Korea. But I'm sure I don't have to tell you, who have heard the problems as well as the progress, how much more remains to be done, how much more outside help is needed, from the United Nations through UNCRA and elsewhere. And UNCRA is short of funds, short of supplies, short of trained experts. If that agency is to continue its work of rebuilding Korea, its efforts must receive the support of the nations, united, their citizens, their governments. The work of the United Nations Korean Reconstruction Agency is having a profound and far-reaching effect on the morale of the people of Korea. Let us never forget that it was that country, weak and unprepared, who dared to stand against the attack, and it is they who have suffered the most in the United Nations cause.
You have been listening to the United Nations radio production of The Long Walk. Frederick March was the narrator. All voices were authentic and unrehearsed, with the exception of UN interpreter Johnny Kim, who is now in Korea and was impersonated by Peter Kim. Music was recorded in Korea by the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by John S. Kim. All material was originally taped in Korea and edited by Theodore Conant of UNCRA. The program was written and produced by Gerald Keane of United Nations Radio.
There's a visitor today in the Norwegian capital of Oslo, a Dutchman who works in Geneva. His name is Dr. Van Heuven Goethart. A few hours ago, the Norwegian government awarded him the Nobel Peace Prize for the work his office has done and continues to do to remove for all time one of the most bitter legacies of war and political upheaval.
"7 years ago today, the General Assembly of the United Nations proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which recognizes that the inherent dignity and inalienable rights of all men are the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. To mark the occasion, United Nations Radio and CBS Radio present Joseph Schildkraut in The Disinherited. This is the transcribed story of the thousands who are the special care of Dr. Van Heuven Goethart, the High Commissioner for Refugees. The thousands who strive to preserve their dignity while their inalienable rights are denied.
This singer you're listening to, she has a history, There was a time when audiences in one of Europe's great opera houses applauded her. You can tell why from the quality of her voice. But did you notice the accompaniment, the off-key piano? As I said, there was a time. She has not been inside an opera house for some years. Nobody applauded her after that song just now. She sang it and we recorded it in a tiny room with a concrete floor in a refugee camp in Trieste. She lives there as a refugee.
The essential quality of a refugee,
says Sir John Hope Simpson in his book The Refugee Problem,
is that he has sought refuge in a territory other than that in which he was formerly resident, as a result of political events which render his continued residence in his former territory impossible or intolerable.
That is the classic definition. A definition cannot describe the human overtones. What are the human overtones? What is it like after you've sought refuge in a territory other than that in which you formerly resided? It could be fine. Sometimes it is. Some, a few, are lucky. But for most, for thousands and thousands, it means a long, slow process of waiting in a camp for a piece of paper, a visa, which means you can move on to a new, productive life. And what is a camp like? Does the word suggest a weekend with the Boy Scouts? Neat little white tents under the trees with hot chestnuts and sing-songs round the fire at night? Listen to Stanley Wright, Special Assistant to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. He is speaking from one of Europe's 200 camps, Kolokintu, Athens, Greece.
The crying of the children, the quarreling of the people, the singing of a woman, the shouting of a man, the playing of a radio. These noises are noises everyone hears in Kolokintu. They are multiplied and echoed by all the walls. In these subdivisions, call them rooms if you like, families live, sleep, cook, wash, quarrel, love. Nearly 100 people to one hall.
Now let's move from the general to the particular. Let's move from the hall itself through one of the canvas and blanket walls into a cubicle, into the dim, noisy space which two people are obliged to call home. Stanley Wright is sitting there.
There are two beds in it, that is to say mattresses with some coverings on it. There is an oil lamp on a very small table. There is a commode with a clock. There is a roof. The roof is made of blankets, old blankets, worn-out blankets, supported by pieces of wood, held together by string. This, then, is the home of people, two human beings. What are their ages? What are their names? What is their history? I will ask them. What is your name?
My name is Aten Avgerino, from Romania, refugee from Romania.
How long have you been living here?
I am living here about 5 years, more than 5 years. In June was 5 years.
And what do you do for your living?
For our living, the government give us 5 drachms a day. 5 drachms, yes. And 5 my sister. I try hard to get a lesson, to teach French or English, whatever I can do. Because I am old now and cannot have a job, more than 6. My sister is a little crippled, cannot hear very well, cannot earn her own living, you know.
How do you live on 10 drachma a day?
Well, 5 drachms a day is oil for the lamp.
5 drachma for the oil.
To warm ourselves, to light ourselves, and to cook.
Mm-hmm. What did you have to eat today?
Today we had a little pilaf, you know what is this, rice, yes, from America. And so we had rice.
And now move outside into the campgrounds. Ask any of those you see how their plans are getting on or when they expect to move on, to emigrate to a new land, Canada, America, Australia, Brazil.
I haven't got my visa yet, but I'm waiting for it.
Waiting for it? How long have you been waiting for your visa?
Well, I've been waiting here for about 4 years.
4 years. And what makes you think that your visa will be coming soon?
Well, that's a hope. Everybody's waiting so long for it.
They wait. 4, 5, 7, 10 years. They wait for a visa, a piece of paper. That means there's someone in a foreign land willing to sponsor them, that there'll be work and a home for them, and that they can leave the overcrowded, demoralizing conditions in the old barracks or abandoned factories or unwanted army huts called camps. And while they wait, what can they do? Get sporadic and unrewarding jobs in the vicinity of the camp, washing dishes, perhaps, or giving lessons like Athena Hungarinov? But what about the hours of darkness when despair swells up inside like a choking fog? If you play the piano like Miss Kvaskova of San Saba Camp, Trieste, you can pour out your dread of the future on the untuned strings. Or you can try to read or study a new language for the new life which you hope lies somewhere ahead. Spanish, French, Italian, English.
I like blue carpet. Blue carpet.
All right, now we have a sitting room with a blue carpet and white
Yes, it's difficult sometimes to keep hoping after you've sought refuge in a territory other than that in which you formerly resided. The slow erosion of passing time is probably the greatest obstacle, but it's certainly not the only one. The rules of immigration are demanding things. You may not have the required skills. You may be too old at 45. You may just be ill. Here's a case history, one of many, related by Mrs. Coe, a representative of the World Council of Churches in Trieste.
Well, there's one couple who've been dogged by bad luck ever since they came to Trieste in 1950. There was a man called Kalinowski, Konstantin, and his wife, Milena. And they came to Trieste in order to emigrate as soon as possible. They went up for a Brazilian mass mission scheme and were rejected because it was discovered that the wife had TB. Later on, they went up again for a Chilean mass migration and were rejected. Again, a year later, for Norway. Then finally, when the wife became better, we managed to get them a visa for Brazil. But unfortunately, the consul discovered that the wife had had TB and refused to accept her. An appeal was made, and finally a visa was again produced, which was lost. And by the time it was found and sent to Trieste, the wife was pregnant and unfortunately could not be accepted till after the baby was born. The baby was stillborn in November, and as a result, the mother again contracted TB and could not possibly go to Brazil.
These are some of the human overtones, the flesh which coats the dry bones of the definition. We've tried to set the scene as it is now, today, 10 years after the first of the refugees were forced to take flight. As the UN High Commissioner Dr. van Heuven-Goethart himself says,
there are in Europe about 200 of those ghastly places called refugee camps, and I would like my executive committee to have one of its sessions in one of those camps, because I feel sure that if you would see the mud and the dirt and the gloom of those places, everybody would feel in the same hurry as I do to close them down altogether. Conditions are so appalling that we must feel ashamed of ourselves that 10 years after the end of the World War, there are still 75,000 people living under those circumstances.
And of these people themselves, who must live hopefully if they can, Dr. Goethard has this to add.
It requires quite some amount of courage to become a refugee. The decision to leave everything you had behind you and walk into a completely uncertain future is such as to make a refugee in principle someone who deserves more our admiration and our charity. And it also, I think, indicates that the average refugee will be a man of some moral courage, a man with some character which really is worthwhile and who would easily become an asset to a country where he would be given an opportunity to live. Of course, when you have been hanging around in a camp for years, you are liable to have lost quite a bit of your self-confidence and whatnot. But the experience shows that as soon as you give those people a real chance, they take it with both their hands.
So, what is being done to provide a real chance? The answer, fortunately, is a great deal. By the High Commissioner's Office, by non-governmental organizations, and by individuals in many countries who have responded to the challenge spontaneously, not just with sympathy, no, but with active, practical work. Individuals like Madame Ariane de Berg of Belgium.
When I first heard the High Commissioner for Refugees speak about the misery of the camps where people lived in such conditions which no human beings ever ought to know, I felt that it was the sacred duty of every one of us belonging to the human family to help them out of these conditions at all cost. Think of the way the people have to live. Think of the idleness, the helplessness, the despair, and the ensuing revolt spreading among young and old as inevitably and as rapidly as tuberculosis. Think of the unwashed, uneducated children, some of them unable even to go to school for lack of decent clothes and shoes.
Madame de Berg thought about these things and talked to her friends about them. The result was what she describes as a snowball campaign to adopt camps in Europe, to provide not only food and clothing and toys for children, but tools of trade to help re-establish the father of a family, and other forms of aid designed not just to relieve distress, but to remove it permanently. Since she started, she and her friends have been joined by other individuals and organizations, and the snowball is now so big that over 40 of the 200 camps in Europe have been adopted. But it's still not enough. As Madame de Berg says,
"Come along, all of you who hear me. The snowballs can be thrown at everybody, rich and poor, young and old, all over the world. Everybody is needed, with their love, their talent, their imagination, their human solidarity, and their enthusiasm. Let us unite over land and water in a common action for humanity, which will bring us close together, so that this action for just a little portion of our fellow beings will also help to bring about this longed-for world peace each of us prays for in his heart of hearts."
The solution of the refugee problem can make a contribution to world peace. This was recognized last November the 3rd when the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the ceaseless effort it is making to find a permanent solution. To give you an idea of the sort of effort being made, here is Dr. Elvin Rees of the World Council of Churches, a man who knows much of the tragedy of the refugees and of the work being done to help them.
There is now a 4-year plan of the High Commissioner, a plan which will involve the expenditure of some $16 million in that period, and which it is hoped will solve the problem of most of the refugees in the camps and of some other especially needy refugees outside the camps. The High Commissioner's report shows that this program has been launched and is underway, but it also shows that it's already in jeopardy for lack of financial support from the governments concerned.
How does the plan operate? High Commissioner Van Heuven-Goethard gives a practical illustration.
There's a man, let's take a peasant, a farmer, who came from Romania and who finds himself now, let's assume, in Austria. What that man wants is to become a farmer and stand on his own feet. In order to do that, we must rent him a farm. We must give him cattle and seed and tools and whatnot, and even a little money to keep going until the first harvest. All that can be given to that man in the form of a credit, and he'll certainly be glad to pay back as soon as he can. However, that credit is not available, and one of the major projects under the program which we are going to carry out is therefore to provide any refugee who is in that category with the necessary credit in order to make it possible for him to re-establish himself in the economy of the country where he is now. Austria is at present importing part of its foodstuffs, and at the same time there are 4,000 abandoned farms. So what would be better than to establish 4,000 farmer refugees on 4,000 farms, increase the production of foodstuffs in Austria, make it unnecessary for Austria to import as much as they do now. It would certainly be an asset to the country, as refugees normally are. That's forgotten, you see. People always think that refugees are people to have sympathy with and so on and so forth, but they are much more deserving our admiration than anything else.
A few weeks ago, Dr. Goedhardt reported to the General Assembly of the United Nations on the progress of this plan and on all the other efforts of his office. There are the legal aspects of the problem, the status of the refugee, the obstacles to admission in the countries of resettlement, the rights of the refugees in their countries of residence, the right to work, to social security, naturalization. There are the many pressing calls for emergency assistance, for help to the old and the infirm. There are the difficult cases for whom there seems to be no future. And there are the schemes to help the refugee find a place in the life of the country where he now finds himself. Dr. Rees recalls a remark which Dr. Goedhardt made in his report to the Assembly.
At the end of the debate, the High Commissioner recalled an occasion when in Greece he asked a refugee what was his dearest desire, and was given the very moving and very simple answer, "Give me a key to a door." And that phrase has become the motto almost of the debate this time. It seems to me that that wasn't quite enough. The concept of a key to a door as a solution to a refugee's problem is wonderful. But before that key can be put into his hand, other keys have to be found. It is quite clear we must find the key to the treasuries of governments so that money is available. It is quite clear we must find the key to ports of entry in countries of immigration so that the resettlement program can play its part. And perhaps last of all and most of all, we still have to find the key to the hearts of men so that human sympathy for these tragic victims of the convulsions of the post-war years may be moved and will in its own way help them to new lives.
I am here in Trieste 4.5 years.
I'm here 4 years.
I would like to continue my education, but I don't know, do I have opportunity to do it?
I haven't got my visa yet, but I'm waiting for it.
Hard work is nothing that we could fear of, and we have to take care of our future.
I've done everything to go to America.
Yes, though many have been resettled overseas or absorbed in the life of their land of refuge, many, many more still wait. So the end is not yet in sight. The work must go on by the Office of the High Commissioner, by the voluntary organizations, and by individuals. In Oslo today, Dr. van Heuven Goedhardt accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of his office. And this is what he said.
Peace, as has been rightly described in various ways, is much more than just absence of war. It is rather a state in which no people of any country, in fact no group of people of any kind, live in fear or in need. Real peace is therefore an ideal to be pursued by mankind relentlessly and with unflagging perseverance, although it may not be an ideal which mankind can ever realize to the full extent. We are therefore deeply grateful for the encouragement given to our office through the award of the Nobel Peace Prize, encouragement which we hope will also affect the governments themselves.
And what has all this to do with today, Human Rights Day 1955, the 7th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? There's a close connection between that declaration and the fate of a refugee. For the inherent dignity of a man begins to crack after years of dispossession. Inalienable rights begin to wear thin. Freedom, justice, and peace become rather remote. But there's no need here to speak in generalities. There are articles in the Universal Declaration quite specific on the matter at issue. Article 13.
Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state, and everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country.
Article 14.
Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution.
Article 23.
Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment.
Thousands upon thousands in Europe today, and more still beyond, do not enjoy the benefits of Articles 13, 14, and 23. But mercifully, when rights are denied, it is in the nature of man to react with determination to restore them. The award of the Nobel Peace Prize to the High Commissioner's office is proof. But it is also in the nature of events that restoration takes time. So may we conclude with a memorandum from Stanley Wright speaking from Geneva.
If all the doors were wide open for all the good, honest, hard-working, freedom-loving people, how easily the problem could be solved, and an end put to the long waiting of the refugees in the camps. But the doors are not wide open.
Joseph Schildkraut, currently starring in the Broadway production The Diary of Anne Frank, was just heard as the narrator in The Disinherited, a transcribed program commemorating the 7th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed on the 10th of December, 1948. The Disinherited was produced by United Nations Radio and was a CBS public affairs program.
This is the United Nations. United Nations Day, October the 24th, 1954.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but couldn't we do it differently?
What do you mean, Mr. Douglas? What's wrong?
Without the trumpets and not too much of that oratory stuff.
But I don't think you understand. This is very important. We're paying tribute to the UN's 9th anniversary.
I know, but let's lay off the trumpets and the tribute for a moment and celebrate in a different way. Let's have a quiet moment or two instead, to think, and perhaps remember. Tell you what we'll do. Let's start it all over again, with no trumpets.
Well, I'm not sure I follow you. It's very unusual. But all right, if you say so. United Nations Radio presents No Trumpets with Melvyn Douglas.
Unusual? Oh, I don't know. Maybe you've already done some thinking and some remembering. Because today there's a birthday being marked. In the houses of God, on the editorial pages of newspapers, in schoolrooms and market squares, cinemas and parade grounds and city halls, the United Nations is 9 years old. Back in 1945, 50 governments were drawing up the UN Constitution, its charter. Now, at the beginning of a charter, any charter, there's usually a sort of foreword which sets out the overall aim of what the authors are trying to achieve. That's what they did in San Francisco, too. The preamble or introduction. Perhaps you haven't heard that preamble for a while. Perhaps, indeed, you've never heard it. It's just 228 words long, words worth listening to and thinking about.
We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small.
Right. Now let's take that apart. Would you begin again, please?
We, the peoples.
You hear that? We must assume, you and I, that our names were not taken in vain. Let's go on.
We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind.
Twice in our lifetime? Perhaps not all of us can remember 2 world wars. There's a new generation. I wouldn't be surprised if many of the people listening to this program would find it hard to mark these names on a map. Chateau Thierry, Vimy Ridge, the Argonne, Le Mans, Gallipoli, Belleau Wood. They were marked on the conscience of mankind by the death of about 10 million young men. But it does seem a long time ago. 1914, 1918. 1939 to 1945 is closer. All too easy to remember.
We correspondents were billeted that night at the regimental command post. The next morning when I awoke, the dawn was bleak. I felt oppressed. I lay in my sleeping bag and I had a hunch. I knew that somehow before that day was over, I'd see something for which all my life and 5 years of war were no adequate preparation. How right can you be? That was the day we liberated Buchenwald. The day I saw my first gas chamber.
War, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind.
Yes, that's why the United Nations exists, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. That was the primary purpose that we, decided on in San Francisco. By the way, when I say we, I mean anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Say, Betty, you know something? Forget what I said last night. I don't mind if it's a girl, you know that.
Look, Alan, I just don't want to talk about it now, okay?
Betty, what's wrong?
Darling, I don't know. Why are we having a child at all? If he's a boy, he can get killed in a war, and if he's a girl, she can die in an air raid shelter. No, this isn't the time.
Hey, now, stop it, darling. All those problems, the world and war, we don't have to worry about that stuff. That's for the politicians and generals and the United Nations. Let them worry about it. You just concentrate on the important things. I've got a job, we've got a home, we've got our own lives to live.
Just a minute, Alan. Too many of us in too many countries talked your kind of way in the years before the past war. Whether you like it or not, you are one of we the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Now let's go on with the preamble.
And to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small.
Mm-hmm. The whole long road of our history is marked with milestones which show the course we've taken. They have names like Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, and the United Nations proclaimed a new one not so long ago, The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a Bill of Rights for all peoples of all ages. Ask someone who has the job of teaching.
Now, these are the rights that everyone in the world is entitled to. Free and equal, no distinctions on grounds of race or color, sex or language or religion, the right to life, liberty, and security of person, no torture or inhuman punishment, right to a fair trial, innocent until proved guilty, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion expression.
Now, maybe these UN rights aren't yet the law of the land in many countries of the world, but this is work in progress, and no year passes without, somewhere in some land, a step in the right direction. The Charter again.
To establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained.
Important. It isn't so long ago we can almost hear the tearing of treaties into scraps of paper, the grating of the Nazi voice.
300 Jahre lang haben wir Land Land unterjocht, Volk Volk niedergeworfen. Jetzt aber haben wir die Welt und jetzt soll Ruhe sein.
Respect for treaties and international law.
And we looked as well toward that great brooding reservoir of the world's troubles and tensions.
To promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom.
You know what we were talking about there? This is the kind of thing we meant. Tell us, Doctor.
1 out of every 8 persons in the world suffers from malaria. 1 out of every 2 is ill-fed. Each year, more than 3 million people die of TB. In many parts of the world, 1 child out of every 4 dies before reaching the age of 1.
What about housing, Mr. Housing Consultant?
We estimate that at least 1/3 of mankind lives in completely inadequate, unhealthy homes. Only a small fraction of humanity has the luxury of plumbing and hot water.
That much for a roof over humanity's head. Ignorance?
We live on this earth with 2,400,000,000 neighbors. Over half of them can't read or write.
Says a man whose job it is to count the literacy rates. Poverty.
2 out of every 3 people in the world earn less than $200 a year. 1 out of every 3 earns less than $50 a year.
Poverty, disease, illiteracy, hunger. These are the blights that must be removed.
And for these ends.
Which brings us to the next stage. How to make the world we want.
And for these ends to practice tolerance and live together as good neighbors.
We want the nations of the world to live together in a world community as sensible, mature families and individuals live together in a normal local community.
And to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security.
What that means is that any situation anywhere on earth likely to lead to a breach of the peace can no longer be a private quarrel between nations. It's public, United Nations business.
To ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest.
It never really worked before. And then, early summer 1950.
I shall read to the members of the Security Council the operative part of the resolution as it now stands. The Security Council recommends that the members of the United Nations furnish such assistance to the Republic of Korea as may be necessary to repel the armed attack and to restore international peace and security in the area.
Armed force had been used not in the common interest. It had to be met with the armed force of the United Nations. The technical name for keeping the peace in such a way is collective security.
To employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples.
Yes, now we're back to that reservoir of troubles and tensions which we mentioned a few minutes ago. Poverty, ignorance, disease, and so on. The Charter says the United Nations have got to do something about it, so they've reached out to help in all directions. UN men and women at work in many lands. Let's open their correspondence files.
Dear Mavis, well, here we are. Libya, it's a little hot and sandy, rather like parts of the Northern Territory. Now, we're planning to start the demonstrations of the new sheep-dipping methods next week, and we expect the equipment within the next few days. Would you readdress all copies of the Farmers Weekly to me here? That is, care of the Food and Agriculture Organization. And do that for at least the next 6 weeks.
Next 6 weeks may be regarded as critical. Stop. Sufficient supplies of serum available, Cairo and vicinity, for 8 days' work. World Health Organization being kept fully informed. Stop. Understand they plan more comprehensive action to start almost immediately.
Almost immediately? Can you imagine that? We leave for Central America by air and have to be in Honduras all next week. The UN Children's Fund people want the school feeding program to start by the end of the month, so we're in a hurry.
In a hurry to start the cement factory producing. Thousands of paddy fields between Tagu and the frontier line need rebuilding and repair. The United Nations factory will be shipping by December, and we must hope for a few days clear enough and warm enough.
Clear enough and warm enough, except in the midwinter nights. That is the dangerous period in the Arab refugee areas. You say the new UN project will house 38,000 in the Gaza Strip. What about all the others, particularly those east of the...
Those east of the B zone will have to use frequencies in the 10 megacycle band. That's in the bulletin from the International Telecommunications Union. In my opinion, we can't disregard a clear decision like that. It would cause chaos in 3 countries. Well, that's all for now. With all good wishes, yours sincerely.
Yours sincerely. All those files of letters, they symbolize a worldwide pooling of knowledge and technical know-how, a sharing of skills for mutual benefit. That's how the UN helps the peoples of the world to be healthier, to grow more, produce more, sell more, learn easier, live better.
To employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims.
Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations.
You've been listening to Melvyn Douglas in the United Nations radio production of No Trumpets, prepared by...
Just a moment. Now you can have your trumpets. Trumpets for the fact that it was born. Trumpets because of what it stands for. Trumpets because the United Nations is 9 years old today.
No Trumpets was written and produced at UN headquarters by the international staff of United Nations Radio. The program was distributed to radio stations in the English-speaking world with the cooperation of the United States Committee for United Nations Day.
This is Montreal, bilingual cosmopolitan city of Canada. We are in the aviation building, headquarters of the International Civil Aviation Organization. Outside, limousines are departing to take passengers to the Dorval Airport. We walk into the main lobby off Dorchester Street and see ticket offices of a number of the world's leading airlines.
This is the last announcement for passengers for Shannon, Ireland, and London, England. The limousines are leaving.
Reservations? Yes, madam. That flight is on time. That's right. You'll be notified if there's any delay. Mm-hmm. Yes. One moment, please. May I help you, sir?
Is this the headquarters of the International Civil Aviation Organization?
Not here, sir. Upstairs, 5th to 10th floors inclusive. Elevators are at the end of the corridor.
Yeah.
Yes, madam. 66 pounds of luggage are permitted on all overseas first-class flights. You're welcome. Reservations? Just one moment, I'll switch your call.
I want...
Yes, sir. Is there something else?
Can you tell me, where do their international flights go?
Whose?
The International Civil Aviation Organizations?
Oh, they don't fly planes.
I don't understand. I was told there was a Chicago convention, and
Chicago convention? Perhaps you'd better go upstairs and find out. Would you mind? Reservations? Oui, madame. C'est correct. Bienvenue. Edith, I get asked about that International Civil Aviation Organization once a day. I get asked 100 times. And I don't have all the answers.
Well, who does?
I'm going to find out right now what they do, even if it takes all my lunch hour.
If you can find out anything, I'd like to know it too.
The International Civil Aviation Organization presents The Freedom of the Skies, a program commemorating the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Convention on International Aviation. The Freedom of the Skies.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization, and my name is Carl Ljungberg. The International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, is a non-commercial organization grouping 65 sovereign states which handles at a governmental level the technical, economic, and legal problems of international aviation by setting the international rules of the air. It is my pleasure to introduce this program to you as a token of commemoration of what to us was a very important event, the signing of the Convention on International Civil Aviation in Chicago 10 years ago.
My job is selling airline tickets downstairs, and every day I get asked questions about the International Civil Aviation Organization, and I feel so stupid. Of course, I have an idea of what it does, but I feel I should know much more.
I think we can help you.
And what's all this about a Chicago conference?
That's where the International Civil Aviation Organization began 10 years ago.
Oh, and what's the convention in Chicago?
Oh, well, by convention, we mean an international agreement. Such an agreement was signed in Chicago 10 years ago by a large number of countries interested in the future of civil aviation.
I see.
Look at that poster over there on the wall.
Preamble to the Convention on International Civil Aviation, Chicago, 1944.
Read it.
Whereas the future development of international civil aviation can greatly help to create and preserve friendship and understanding among the nations and peoples of the world.
International civil aviation is doing that and much more. Spinning a network of airways around the globe, it's conquered both natural and man-made barriers, crossed boundary lines of race and custom, of laws and language and prejudices, too. It's met the challenge of time and space, and met it over the last 8 years through the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, ICAO. ICAO speaks for 65 of the nations of the world. Of the many words to describe the concept behind the Chicago Conference, one of the most fitting would be vision. Yes, vision is the word for those far-sighted men of many nations at Chicago. They handed over to the peoples of the world the assurance that with freedom from want and from fear would go the freedom of the skies. Let's turn back the clock 10 years to November 1944. And let's turn back our radio dials, too.
Weekend football scores. Notre Dame 13, Illinois 7. Navy 26, Penn nothing.
We present a medley from the Broadway hit Oklahoma.
Army 27, Duke 7. We take you now to Chicago.
We're speaking to you from the Stevens Hotel in Chicago this November 1st on the occasion of the opening of the Conference on International Civil Aviation. This international meeting is being hailed in aviation circles throughout the Allied nations as the preparation for the rebirth of international civil
November
aviation.
1944. It was a world of war headlines, of important military events dominating the universal scene. Perhaps you didn't hear too much about that conference at the time. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States of America, took the time to write this message.
As we begin to write a new chapter in the fundamental law of the air, let us all remember that we are engaged in a great attempt to build enduring institutions of peace. Air transport will be the first available means by which we can start to heal the wounds of war and put the world once more on a peacetime basis. In the past, the struggle for the freedom of the seas has led directly to a number of wars both in the eastern and western hemispheres. We do not need to make that mistake again. I know you will see to it that the air, which God gave to everyone, shall not become the means of domination over anyone. Let us therefore work together so that the air may be used by humanity to serve humanity.
And the views of President Roosevelt were shared by many. The conference was opened by U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Adolph A. Burley.
The chair will recognize the chairman of the delegation from Belgium, Monsieur le Vicomte Alain Duparc.
I am sure that I voice the feelings of all the delegations gathered here today when I say how grateful we are for the initiative taken by the government of the United States in convening
The chairman of the delegation from China.
The air has been used as a medium of aggression, and it is our purpose hereafter to make it a highway serving all peoples of the earth. Fortunately, aviation is a young art, and therefore more subject to the influence.
Among the delegations affirming their faith in the ability of men to use a powerful weapon as an instrument of friendship are some whose countries have suffered from the effects of aviation at war.
Monsieur Max Himans, chairman of the French delegation.
During the course of our voyage by air to the United States, more than one of us thought about these planes that had parachuted men and weapons into France, of those more daring still which landed to pick up and spirit away French patriots and Allied intelligence agents. Messieurs, this is the first time that France has participated in an international conference since 1940 with the full authority which goes with the recognition.
The chairman of the delegation of Mexico.
Aviation has won the war, and now it must win the peace. In our hands is placed the future of one of the conquests which does honor to humanity and on which depends the health, prosperity, and greatness of our respective countries.
I see. Now I'm beginning to understand about the Chicago Convention.
Good.
But airplanes have been flying ever since the Wright brothers. When was all this organized?
In Paris, in 1905, just 2 years after the Wright brothers lifted their kite off the beach at Kitty Hawk.
Uh-huh.
A small organization was formed in Europe on French and Belgian initiative to deal with l'aviation sportive,
yes, private flying. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go on.
Well, this organization was called the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale and was extremely active in Europe in coordinating to some extent the still marveled-at sport of aviation. The war clouds of 1914 darkened the skies of Europe. From then on, the airplane was employed by man to destroy his fellow man.
Airplanes? Well, yes, I suppose we could use them to spot the artillery, sort of sky observation platforms, artillery spotters, you know. But it's a much too precarious form of transport to be effective.
In spite of such predictions, the First World War disproved the restricted future envisaged for the airplane by the Colonel Blimps. And when the victory bells chimed throughout the Allied capitals, where was that artillery spotter now? The post-war period was echoing with the exploits of the wartime airplane, and equally quick to sing the praises of what was to be expected from its peacetime counterpart.
Het vliegtuig is een prachtige uitvinding.
L'avenir? Mais mon cher, c'est indiscutablement dans l'aviation.
El avión, una revolución en el transporte.
Das Flugzeug, wunderbar.
L'aeroplano è bello, come un uccello. No doubt about it. The aeroplane's definitely the thing. I always said so.
Yes, the airplane was a wonderful invention.
I always said so.
And among those who realized the important role that the airplane was destined to play in the new post-war era was a young French Air Force captain, Albert Roper. In 1919, Roper had a dream, a vision of international peacetime aviation. He made a plan, and he showed it to France's veteran premier, Georges Clemenceau.
Capitaine Roper, j'ai soumis votre projet à la commission aéronautique de la conférence
Captain
de la paix à
Roper,
Versailles.
I have submitted your plan to the Aeronautical Commission of the Versailles Peace Conference. They were immediately impressed with your plan. Full of vision.
Excellent.
Very good.
Une organisation pour régir les divers plans nationaux présentés à travers le monde.
An organization to regulate the many national aviation projects which are already blossoming throughout the world, so that through an exchange of ideas, aviation could grow up with an international background and in an atmosphere of cooperation. Yes, very good. Albert Roper's dream, the International Commission for Air Navigation, became a reality. And from its Paris headquarters for the next 20 years, countries worked together in the peaceful promotion of aviation. Meanwhile, in 1928, another aviation conference was held in Havana. There, 11 republics of the New World ratified the Pan American Convention on Commercial Aviation. That convention defined broad principles of air transport, but it made no attempt to set up technical standards or to provide for any continuity through a permanent organization.
Excuse me, I don't think I quite follow. What did all this have to do with the meeting in Chicago?
Well, there was the war.
Uh-huh.
And of course, during the war, for military reasons, aviation was developed so greatly that the organization which Roper founded was outdistanced.
I see.
And so, in Chicago in 1944, it had to be brought up to date. But this time, it had to be a lot bigger. Because for every plane that crossed a mere continent before the war, hundreds now span the globe.
Well, did everyone realize what you've been telling me? I mean, the fact that the world was getting smaller and...
Well, the future of aviation got a lot of different reactions in 1944, but even then there was one point upon which no one disagreed. Civil aviation was going to need some central authority set up by the nations of the world. This made sense to everyone.
We in Holland are an old maritime nation and used to trading with people in the far corners of the earth. Our airline has been operating since 1919 and is one of the keys to our national economy. All the countries of the world must work together to make aviation safe and of practical international value.
Well, Canadians certainly have a lot to thank aviation for. When 39 came along, our whole North Country was relying on air supplies. We've even got the Mounties flying since those days, and that's a real sign that aviation's changing our face. This idea of getting everybody together so that every country will have the same chance for aviation to help it seems pretty good to me.
At no time did we British realize more that aviation was an invaluable link with the outside world than during the dark days of 1940. With an organization to guarantee that in the future aviation will be peaceful and competition equitable, we are sure there will be a place for all.
Australia and New Zealand have both publicly declared that in the interests of the future peace of the world and in order to facilitate the rational development of the world's air commerce, an international air transport authority should be appointed.
El Salvador is a small country, but aviation could be extremely useful in helping it. When aviation expands, as it surely will do within the next few years, we want to be equipped to be able to use it profitably.
In fact, all those countries attending Chicago had the vision to see that the conference and its purposes to create an international organization would develop a healthy, competitive aviation. And healthy and competitive it certainly was. Surely aviation's trends were foreseen at the conference. But how many could foresee that 10 years later, thousands and thousands of air travelers would be stepping out of airplanes not only on both sides of the Atlantic, but all over the world?
Sydney, Cairo, and Rome. Arriving passengers will be cleared through health, customs, and immigration, after which they can be met at exit gate number 4.
Dad, here I am over here.
Hello, my boy. How are you? How was the trip?
It was wonderful, smooth as a bird. You know, it's hard to believe we left Sydney at 7 o'clock on Friday, and here it is Monday morning, and I'm here in London with you.
3 days. And to think your mother and I took 4 weeks and 3 days when we came over on the boat. Anyway, come on. Your mother's waiting for you outside.
Yes, air travel has changed our concept of distance and of time. Instead of racing against the clock is very often racing to keep up with the airplane as it crosses the time meridians of the world. Is that pretty clear?
Yes, I understand all that. I don't mean to be rude, but it's getting close to the end of my lunch hour. Could you just tell me what is the most important thing the International Civil Aviation Organization does today?
Well, let's take your line, air travel. Your company's job is to carry passengers. And what's the passenger most concerned about?
Getting there quickly and safely.
Precisely. And that's ICAO's prime concern, too. So, we've set up certain safety aids. Well, to give just one example of such aids, the Atlantic is patrolled by specially equipped weather ships, whose maintenance is contributed to in some measure by all the North Atlantic states. Would you like to hear an actual aircraft in contact with a weather ship on the route to Iceland?
I certainly would.
All right. Let me play this tape recording for you.
Weathership India from Trans-Canada 533, our position at 0040 Zulu, 6100 north, 1430 west, cruising flight level 100 on top, fuel remaining 9 hours, requesting the upper winds for 10,000. Go ahead.
Roger, 933, the 10,000 wind was 209.24 knots.
Wind 2000 Zulu for 10,209 at 24 knots. Roger, thank you.
And believe me, transatlantic planes rely on those weather ships.
I'm sure they do.
The complex problems which ICAO was created to deal with range through many different phases of aviation. Let's take these weather stations, for example, and see how the network was set up. Assistant Secretary General Edward Weld recorded the story in a speech recently. Here it is now.
The common need of states operating aircraft in the North Atlantic region for detailed meteorological information, communication facilities, and other air navigation services has been met by the device of joint international financing of many of the necessary facilities, by a series of agreements, the first of which was signed in London in September 1946. The states concerned have succeeded in establishing and maintaining a network of ocean stations in the North Atlantic and numerous air navigation services in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroes. The ocean stations network consists at present, in accordance with the latest agreement signed in Paris in February 1954, of 21 ocean ships doing tours of duty at 9 fixed points in the North Atlantic. These ships, especially equipped with intricate and expensive apparatus, in addition to performing their primary function of providing meteorological information, provide communications services and radio navigation aids and search and rescue services for ships and aircraft in distress.
Then there is air navigation, the actual flying, the movement of aircraft from one place to another by predetermined, planned, and serviced routes. The chief executive of this activity in ICAO is Air Vice Marshal Alan Ferrier, Assistant Secretary General in charge of air navigation, who incidentally was a member of the Canadian delegation to Chicago.
The past 10 years have witnessed the transition from comparatively small, short-range aircraft to the present-day airliners capable of non-stop flight for distances of over 3,000 miles, at speeds approaching the subsonic, and at altitudes much nearer to the stratosphere. It is evident that the economic development of air transport, in all its services to mankind, must broaden the base of its market, and this will inevitably result in a much more marked difference between the equipment and techniques used on the one hand for long-haul services and on the other hand for short-haul services to the masses of great populations. These differences in equipment and techniques will call for continued effort by the organization, especially for those parts of the world where international boundaries are crossed frequently, so that technological development will never be shackled by inertia or an unwarranted worship of tradition.
There could be no sound development of civil aviation in time of peace except within the rules of the law. ICAO's legal director, P.K. Roy, tells us about the air law of today.
At Chicago, a legal regime was established. It is founded upon the principle that the aircraft of any state flying into or over the territory of another state would be governed by the laws and regulations of the latter. To avoid the almost impossible conditions which would result from the great differences among the laws of the several states through which an aircraft might pass on an international flight, rules and regulations relating to flight of aircraft have been developed by the International Civil Aviation Organization during the last 10 years with very considerable success and practical effect.
Today, with aviation recognized as the golden key to many of the barriers standing in the way of economic and industrial development, many countries have been in need of an air transportation system to span centuries of progress in one leap, from the ox cart to the airplane, bypassing other forms of surface transport which might prove too costly or take too long to build. Under the Technical Assistance Program sponsored by the United Nations, ICAO missions of experts in all the different aviation specialties are sent to countries which ask for their services. Heading the ICAO Technical Assistance Program is the director, E.R. Marlin.
Civil aviation is one of the most recent manifestations of our mechanized age. Its progress in the hands of the more advanced countries has been phenomenal. It is only natural that the countries which have lagged behind in their industrial development should wish to share the benefits of this form of transport, which can link them to centers of population in any part of the world in a matter of hours, and can provide many of them whose territory consists of deserts, mountains, and jungles, with a most valuable means of communications. Apart from the practical accomplishments, technical assistance by ICAO has had a marked psychological effect upon the peoples of the underdeveloped countries where ICAO has worked. It is an inspiration for them to see their own nationals undertaking efficiently and successfully the most skilled and exacting of tasks. If the young men of these countries can operate their own aviation services successfully, they can do the same in other fields equally or even more complex.
Well, there you are, young lady. I think I've answered your questions about what ICAO is and what the Chicago Convention was.
Thanks a lot.
Sorry I kept you so long.
Oh, I'm not a bit sorry. The next time somebody asks me what ICAO is, I think I'll have some of the answers.
The 10 years since 1944 have witnessed many developments, seen many obstacles overcome by international cooperation and know-how through the medium of the International Civil Aviation Organization. Dr. Edward Warner, a member of the U.S. delegation at Chicago, is now the president of the 21-nation permanent governing body of the organization. Dr. Warner.
The men who met in Chicago did not accomplish all that their governments had hoped for, but they accomplished a remarkable feat in planning an organization and endowing it with a constitution that has proved reasonably adequate throughout a period of such expansion as only the greatest optimists would have ventured to expect. With 30 times the amount of passenger travel and freight shipment by air that there was immediately before the war, and with vastly increased use of international arrangements affecting civil aviation, the framework constructed in 1944 still fits.
The Freedom of the Skies commemorates the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Convention on International Civil Aviation. This program was written by the Public Information Office of the International Civil Aviation Organization in Montreal, Canada. The voices of the past were all dramatized. The voices of ICAO officials were authentic. The Freedom of the Skies was produced in New York by the international staff of United Nations Radio.
Ronald Colman, Loretta Young, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and many other stars will appear on this new series of United Nations programs. Stay tuned now for It's a Small World.
This is Ronald Colman inviting you to hear a story. We think you'll like it because it's a small world.
You are listening to It's a Small World, presented by United Nations Radio.
Saidi, hello. My name is Mohammed Taufik, and my country is Egypt. The story is about me and the most exciting thing that ever happened to me in Cairo, where I live, and my friend Amina. I call my story The Day of the Armband.
Thank you, Mohammed Taufik. The boy whose voice you just heard is real. He has a home and 2 loving parents, just like you and my daughter. He lives in the ancient land of the pyramids and the sphinxes. But that, sad to tell, is just about all most of us know about him. How unfortunate that is, because all of us like to know our neighbors, and friend Mohammed is our neighbor. If you just look at different countries as houses on a main street that runs clear around this world. So let's listen to his story, and I'll be back after the show. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Well, I live at 23 Hadat al-Shams, the Lane of the Sun, Cairo, Egypt. I got ready for school that special morning. It was like any other day. Same old noises, same old things to see. The peddler's donkey carts, the cries of the fruit sellers, the milk bringer pouring from his big jar into people's cups. My friend Azim, the carpenter, pulling open the shutters of his shop. Same old thing. So I took the same old bean and cucumber sandwiches and went to school. I go to Misra al-Gadida, primary school. And this was a special day because my history class was going to the pyramids. But when we got to school...
Students, boys and girls, attention, please. Children, I'm very sorry. A telephone call has just come. There will be no trip to the pyramids today.
Ah.
Instead, there are certain instructions. Children, go back to your homes immediately. There will be no more school today. There will be no more school until further notice. Go now, my pupils. Goodbye, and may God preserve us all.
Well, there was nothing else to do, so I started home. But I heard somebody running behind me. Mohammed! Mohammed, wait for me! It was Amina. She lives across the lane from me. I wondered what she wanted.
Mohammed, can I walk home with you?
What's the matter? Don't you know the way?
Yes, but I'm scared.
What's there to be scared about? Come on. Girls. Me walking home with a girl. That was something new. But everything else was different, too.
Mohammed, look. The streets, they're empty.
She was right. They were.
All the shops are closing. The windows, the shutters.
They sure were.
Listen. An ambulance. Look at the Red Crescent.
The Red Crescent is our Red Cross. And God preserve us all. It was turning into our lane. Well, did we run. And when we got to the corner of the Lane of the Sun, we stopped for a moment at the Ibn el Beled, the corner cafe called Local Boy. Nothing wrong there. The radio was on as usual. Some mushy old love song. Men were sitting around listening, drinking coffee and tea and smoking nargila. You know, those long water pipes.
Please, Mohammed, come along. I want to go home.
We ran into our lane, and there...
All right, back into your houses. Stand back.
There, right in the middle of our lane, God preserve us all, was a huge fire, and a policeman waving the people back with his baton. And all the shops were closed. Fahmy, the silversmith, Asfour, the shoemaker, and the leather worker. All except the shop of Azim, the carpenter, my friend. And out of Azim's shop were coming more policemen.
Look, Mohammed, they're carrying out someone's bed.
Mattress and pillows.
They've got Azim's clothes, his fez. Mohammed, that's Azim's bed. And they're burning them. They're burning up all of Azim's things.
And there came Azim on a stretcher. Azim, my friend. He makes me boats to sail on the Nile. He makes Amina dolls to dress. He came closer, and he was moaning.
You, boy, get away. Stay away. Stay away.
But, officer, that's my friend.
I don't care if he's your own father. Stay away.
What had happened? What was going on in our lane? Why the fire and the burning of clothes? Where were the peddlers? Why so many army trucks going up and down the street? Army trucks full of soldiers.
What's going on? Oh, Mohammed, I'm awful scared.
The Hadi. We'll go ask the Hadi. The Hadi tells stories for piastres. Pennies, I guess it is, in the Local Boy Cafe. He is blind, but he is our friend, too. We ran to the cafe. Everyone was standing around the radio listening. In a corner, we found him.
You ask him.
Hadi. Salam alaikum, Hadi.
Alaikum salam.
To grown people, we say salam alaikum. God be with you. To kids, we say Saidi. Hello.
Hadi, what's happening?
Tell us, Hadi.
It has come back to Cairo.
What? What's come back?
Listen, young eaters of Masasat. There is a death that curses Egypt. Rich and poor will it strike, the old and the young, the dull and the wise. You in your young strength, and I in my infirmity, with no eyes.
Oh, Hadi.
Believer along with infidel. None will be alive to pray or to tell after the death has passed this way. The death that came to us today.
The death?
The death from which none can fly. We can do nothing but wait and die.
Hadi, what is the name of this death?
It is called cholera.
When the Hadi stopped, we heard the radio talking with a new voice.
Your nearest health center for vaccination. Once again, people of Egypt, a bulletin. Your government urges you to go home, to avoid crowds, and to follow these instructions. For your safety and that of your neighbors, your city, your
Mohammed, let's go home. Be quiet. Let me listen.
Washing it carefully. 2, destroy all
I listened to the
things. They
radio
may be contaminated with
and
cholera
thought of what the
germs.
Hadi said.
3,
And then I got my idea. I knew what I was going to do.
Mohammed, where are you going?
Over to the hospital. Go on home. You're a girl.
No, if you can go, I can go.
The hospital was near the mosque. We went in. It was a long corridor.
Well, what's this? What are you doing here?
Oh, Doctor, I want to...
Can you tell us where is Azim the carpenter?
Wait, one at a time.
But, Doctor, I want to help.
Well, with what, son?
With the cholera.
Cholera, son. Just step in here,
Amina and I watched him. The doctor went over to a white table. Then he washed up.
Son, suppose I said you could help. What would you do?
We heard the news on the radio.
Doctor, I would go around to people who do not have radios and tell them not to listen to the old man's story about death.
The Hadi told us.
I would tell them that this is not the old days, that we have hospitals and injections, and I would want an injection first, and I will tell them it doesn't hurt.
Good boy. Well, let's get started. Let me have your arm.
Then I saw he had in his hand a little glass thing with a needle. He pinched my arm, and it became white where he pinched. He raised the needle, then... Ow!
All right. Next, young lady. There. Now what do you tell them?
Well,
I'll tell them it doesn't hurt.
And tell them this, too. You were the first to come for these life-saving injections. Tell them there will be enough serum to go around. Our own Egyptian laboratories are working night and day, and the United Nations is flying more from America, from France, from Russia, and Greece, and India. So tell them not to be afraid, because something new has come to help this old land. Something called the World Health Organization. Now, can you remember all that?
Yes, Doctor.
Good. Now, wait. Here. The government has prepared these for those who serve in this time of danger. I won't need them working in here, but you wear them. Now, go on. Put them on your arms. That's it. Now go and tell the people.
And he gave us armbands to wear.
And we wore them.
And we went to work. We got our friends to get their injections.
And their parents.
Even the Hadi.
We ran errands.
We answered phones. And when the packages of serum came from all the countries, from the United Nations, we helped unpack them.
Because we were the wearers of the armbands.
And that's our story. It was our day. The United Nations helped us.
And we helped the United Nations.
This is Ronald Coleman again. First, a salam to you, Mohammed and Amina, for the story. Now, the UN is more than just a couple of capital letters to that boy and girl. It kept them alive, and thousands of other Cairo children. Well, the cholera passed over their lane, and except for Azim, the carpenter, everything's all right again down by the pyramids. The Hadi still sits in the corner cafe, but he tells a new story. And the cafe has a new name. Now they call it United Nations Cafe. Oh, one thing. Remember when the Hadi called the children eaters of Masasat? That's a nickname for Cairo boys and girls. Translation, eaters of lollipops. So you see, you've got a thing or two in common with the kids who live far away. That's one of the things the United Nations is for. To pave a main street of understanding clear around the world, so all you children in all your houses will get to know each other better. Next week at this same time, you'll find out more of what the UN means when it says, "It's a small world."
Each week at this time, United Nations Radio brings you another story from another land. Authentic and exciting proof that it's a small world. The script by Alan Sloan, original music by Charles Paul, and direction by William Hamilton. The program is produced by Gerald Keane of United Nations Radio.